Hello, welcome back to Branford Arts. I'm Frank Carano, the host of this series, and we've created this program really to bring the public up to date as to what's happening in the arts community in Branford. In the first program we had a while ago, we talked about the Branford Arts Alliance, which is an organization that was formed about 5 years ago, try to support the arts in Branford in many different ways. And the primary focus of the organization has really been to try to find venues for our local artists to display their work and to have the public benefit from those opportunities to see the art that's created right here in our community. Branford has a long history of welcoming artists, and there are neighborhoods in Branford where many artists have found places to settle in, not only to live but to create their work. And so we have a certain ambiance in some of those communities that sort of give you a sense that artists live here and work here. So art is really an important factor, it seems to me, in how we are able to live our lives in a way in which we can appreciate everything that is available in our community and in our surroundings. And a thing that always impresses me about art and artists is how many different ways they can find to be creative. There are so many ways that a person can express himself or herself artistically. And sometimes we think that all artists are kind of born that way, and that you have to decide you're going to be an artist, when you're in 5th grade and your teacher starts talking to you about, what kind of career path are you headed on. And that's not always the case. I think it's true that artists have talent that I think they're born with, or certainly they have the capacity, they have a talent that can be developed. Some people take the advantage of developing it, and some people don't act on it. But the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to, you can be an artist and still do other things, and still have other aspects of your life that you can participate in. And today, I'm happy to welcome our guest, who's Coffey. She's a resident of Branford, resident of Short Beach, an artist, but she had another life before that, right?
I certainly did.
So why don't you tell us what you did before you became an artist?
I think one of the funny things is that Frank and I probably had interacted at some point or other 35 or 40 years ago, because I was a teacher in New Haven for 6 years. So my career path took me through 32 years of teaching high school math and technology. So I taught in New Haven and in Guilford and in Durham, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And I retired a few years ago and started a new interest.
So were you always involved in art, even when you were teaching and working in
Well, I didn't teach art at all. I taught math, as I said, and I did take courses at Creative Arts Workshop once in a while. But as anybody who's a teacher knows, teaching eats up a lot of your time. Right. And so it wasn't until I retired that I was able to start taking a lot more classes and really devote myself a lot more to what I like to do.
But did you always know you had artistic talent?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So when you were in grammar school, teachers always recognized that you could draw or you could paint.
Well, I don't know. I knew that I was that I had some talent, and we didn't have very much art in where I was growing up in the Midwest.
Right.
There was not much happening at school. And
I neither did I. I don't consider myself particularly talented, as an artist. I appreciate art and I enjoy art, but I always thought that I might be able to, paint something or draw something. And I remember when I was in elementary school in New Haven, I went to a parochial school, so you had one teacher. and she was a nun, and she taught you everything.
I went to parochial school too, so I know just what you're talking
about. And you know, once in a while we had art.
Yeah, exactly. Once every 3 months.
And then, so my goal, my personal goal, was always to be selected, because the school had windows facing the street. I went to a school in Worcester Square in New Haven, and every Christmas the windows would be painted with designs for the holiday. And so I would always like secretly hope that maybe, you know, she would ask me to paint one of the windows, but it was never, I was never selected. And I have to admit that the young lady that she selected was very talented. She would create these beautiful designs in poster paint, you know, which from inside you could see all the streaks and everything of the paintbrush, but from the street they looked great. You know, candles and holly leaves and things like that. So I often wondered whether she went on to continue, you know, to do something with her artistic talent, because she definitely had talent. So so when you retired, you were able to start thinking about, you know, creating some space and some time in your life to pursue your passion, which was art. So how did you start?
I started at Guilford Art Center, and I took some watercolor classes there. And so I spent probably 3 or 4 years just doing watercolor, and it's a wonderful, wonderful medium. It's spontaneous. You know, once something happens, it's pretty hard to undo it if it's a mistake. But sometimes these wonderful little things occur with colors and things, and so I liked watercolor a lot.
That's always what impresses me about watercolor painting, is the fact that, you know, the medium is kind of uncontrollable sometimes, you know, because you have to, there's a lot of water involved, right?
I also, this is sort of an interesting thing, I also thought when I was first starting that the very, very best painters were the ones that could paint very realistically. And I thought, oh, they're so skilled, they're really the best. And it didn't take me more than a couple years of having some really good art teachers who I started to realize this isn't true at all. This is, you know, they have a skill and they are really good at that, but there's all these other types of things that are more abstract or less representational or whatever that are just as good in other ways. So.
Yeah, because I am, you know, when I've seen watercolors of, you know, like where you see a person's face and you can see the features and even expressions on their faces, and you say, oh, that must be so hard to do with a brush and that kind of water.
Well, hopefully they're interpreting that person how they see it rather than just making a photograph. You know? So,
exactly. So that's an interesting point you raised. So that's part of what art is all about, right? Not
it's how you view things.
You know, an exact image. I mean, sometimes you think that a portrait should be, you know, like a photographic image of the person. But that's not really true, is it?
I don't think so.
I mean, it seems to me that the artist should try to bring something out in the portrait that you don't necessarily get from a photograph. Right? So I went to the Smithsonian a couple of years ago to see the Obama portraits.
Oh, right.
Of Michelle and Barack Obama. And I don't know if people have seen it, but, you know, President Obama's sitting in a chair like this, and the backdrop is a wall of flowers. And it's kind of a, you know, an informal pose, and he's kind of looking right at you. And it's I've seen people just standing in front of it, you know, trying to absorb everything that the portrait is offering you. And I did the same thing. And then when you go to a different part of the museum and they show Michelle Obama, I felt that, first of all, I didn't think it looked a lot like her, but then again, it's probably not what the artist wanted to do, but she's shown in a certain pose wearing, you know, a beautiful gown and a kind of a thoughtful pose. But I thought, here are two people, you know, so widely photographed and that you think you know so well, and yet when I stood in front of those two portraits, I saw them in a different way that I had never
Yeah.
seen them before.
Yeah.
So you have to give the artist credit for
Yeah.
having, been able
Yeah,
to
his vision.
create that for the viewer. So, and I think that's really what art is all about, right? What can you create so that the viewer is able to
Yeah.
benefit from the experience of looking at your art,
Yeah. Yeah.
hanging it. I have one of your pieces in my home, and I enjoy looking at it every time I walk by it.
Thank you.
It's in a room
Yeah.
that I'm constantly, walking
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
And it creates a certain, when I look at it, it creates a certain kind of ambiance for me because it's a quiet and kind of
Yeah.
peaceful.
Yeah.
And you'll show it in a minute or two, but it's also a cityscape. And I grew up in the city, so I
Right.
still feel
Yeah.
connected
Yeah.
to the city, and I like what you represented there.
Thank you.
So anyway, so you went from watercolors to a totally different
Well,
way of.
not exactly. Those first, because I don't have any formal training at all, I was fooling around a lot with whatever classes I was taking and whatever that teacher liked to do. And so I did a little bit with oil and decided that I just can't do this. And then one day I was taking a class down in New Haven at the Creative Arts Workshop, and it was an abstract watercolor class. And the teacher brought in some rice papers, and she started showing us about painting the rice papers and collaging them onto our artwork. And I thought, well, this is fun. And so anyway, I just started with that, and then I just moved into using a lot of the watercolor papers I had already painted, or cutting up actually old paintings that were not successful, cutting pieces of those up and using them in collages. And
So what's a collage?
well, that's another kind of interesting thing. I thought, being ignorant without that much training, I thought collages were when people cut up magazines and put them together and made things out of them. And
Like
that's
decoupage.
Yeah. And I thought, I don't want to do that. And so when this teacher was using the rice papers, and so that was really an eye-opener for me. And so what a collage, I think, is just anything that you just, it can be paper or pieces of wood or whatever you do that you just adhere to another surface.
So what are some of the materials that you use in your collages?
What I've been doing is using mostly watercolor, because I had done so much of that and I had so many pieces of watercolor paper. But I've also taken a class where they've created papers for collaging that are out of acrylic. And the conundrum I'm in right now is that watercolor is not, if it gets wet, it's going to disturb the watercolor. And so all my work has to be behind glass until I could transition totally to acrylic, because then I wouldn't need to
So you actually
protect it.
paint paper
Ahead of
to
time.
give you the material that you
Right.
want to
Yeah.
use to
Yeah.
create the collage, which is
Exactly.
a collection of shapes and
Precisely.
materials
Yeah.
that you
I don't
put
paint
together.
the papers with the collage in mind. Like
Right.
I have stacks of blue papers and stacks of yellow papers, and so some days I just decide I need more gray papers, and so that day I just paint all kinds of gray papers. And I've also taken a couple classes with a teacher who's really good about texture in your papers, and so you can add sand to your paper, or sponge it, or all kinds of things you can do to make your paper have more texture and not be flat.
And you also use found objects, so to speak, right?
The first time I did that, it was in the beginning of, I think it was the very first cityscape I was doing, and I had a Starbucks coffee cup on the table in front of me, and I was putting these pieces down. And actually, here's a piece right here. That's kind of far away from you, and there's my coffee cup right there, and I'm looking at the piece that goes around it that keeps the coffee warm, the little holder. I thought, that could be like fencing or something in my collage. And another thing that I thought of is a couple of teachers had told me that you should always use the best materials, make sure everything's acid-free, make sure. And then I had another teacher along the line that said, if you think you're going to be famous and your stuff is going to be around for 1,000 years, maybe you should worry about that. I guess I won't worry about that, so I went ahead and decided I'll just put that in the collage anyway, and maybe it'll be rotted out in 50 years. I don't know, but
my piece
it does. It has that in
yeah.
there. But that would be like found papers, or maps, or currency from other countries.
Anything
or
interesting,
yeah.
either
Feathers.
by its texture, its color, or maybe a little design that it might have.
I mean, people put, feathers and shells and all kinds of things into collages.
Right.
I haven't gone that far yet, but
So you
yeah.
start out with a design?
Well, in the beginning, I would struggle trying to think of what will I do, what can I make? And one of the teachers I took talked about painting in a series. And I thought that meant painting the same thing over and over and over again. And I thought, well, that sounds really boring. But what I realized eventually is that that's not what it is at all. So it's like I started off with first series I did was a California road trip series. And my sons both live in California and a couple of my nephews. So I had asked them for photographs of windy roads in California. And plus I'd been on a road trip out there with a friend, and so I had some pictures also. So I used those for my first series. So the series is really not the same thing over and over again. It's the theme, really, of what you're doing.
But the same theme.
Yeah, yeah. So I had I did maybe about 7 or 8 or 9 of those. And what's really fun is as you're doing one, I work on one at a time usually. And so as I'm doing one, I think of, oh, you know what I could do? And then I think of the next one. And so working in a series is really, really a nice way to do it. Each one generates another idea for me. Yeah.
So is this like an outline for one, or?
What I did was I brought a few pieces of paper just so you could see ahead of time, like the types of papers that I might be, these are some papers that I would cut. I don't have any idea what they're going to be. This could be water, it could be a sky. One of the teachers I had said, remember, skies don't have to be blue. And, so it could be like there's a yellow paper with some green in it. So any of these. This is a fun one. This is a paper you made with water and salt, you put the paint on and then sprinkle salt in there, and it makes this little funny design. So that could be snowflakes or something.
Yeah.
So at any rate, I start off with pieces of paper and an idea. And usually I sketch the idea on a piece of paper, kind of small, so I have an idea of where I'm going with the whole thing, and then just cut out a piece of paper to be the background, and then I usually start with the sky if it's some kind of a landscape or a city or whatever, and then start moving down from there. It usually doesn't turn out what I had in mind,
Right.
But each piece kind of leads you on to something else. But so I don't have any samples of the road trips because those all sold. But I do have.
Good for you.
Yeah. The next series I started was some winter landscape
Yeah, I love those.
collages. Yeah. So with something like that, I would just start with this big gray piece of paper to be the background, and then just start cutting out other shapes. And limit your colors. You don't want to have too many colors. You don't want it to be too busy.
And so none of those images are painted on there.
No. They're all pieces of paper, separate pieces of paper that I cut.
You have precisely cut.
Precisely cut.
So beautifully.
Yeah.
And then you attach them to the background.
Another thing that's kind of fun is when I was doing the road trips, the first 1 or 2 that I was doing, I was trying really hard to have them all be exactly lining up on the edge here. So I'd be trying to cut this so I could mat it afterwards and it would all be precise. And it was so much effort. And one of the teachers that I had said, what if you didn't worry about that? What if you just let it?
Yeah,
and
I love the way this
I know, and that's what's really happened is when things go off the page, people just love it.
I have the math
It's easier
limit,
for me. Yeah. So it's easier for me to do it that way. So I had, probably maybe 8 of the winter landscape ones. Then the next series I moved into was sailboats. And so there's one of the sailboat collages that I did.
Those are so nice.
And they were a lot of fun.
I love the way the bridge comes up over the mat.
Yeah, isn't it just right up? And it's easier for me to not worry about this.
The water isn't blue.
Yeah, the water's not blue.
Yeah.
Well, what I did with that one is, I picked out the piece of paper to use for the sky, and then in here I see this color that's sort of a yellowy color appearing up here in the sky, and so then you want to pick up that color in the rest of the painting. Like this would not make sense for me to put in Kelly green in here or something like that. It just wouldn't go. But I love the idea about not worrying about what happens on the edges.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. I found that it is very appealing to people too when they see it like that.
Yeah, and your eye So when you look at it, you can sort of imagine how that is keeps
Right,
going, it keeps
yeah,
moving away.
Yeah. Yeah, but when I do one like that, I like this bridge one, I don't have any particular bridge in mind. Usually what I do is I'll look online and print out a whole bunch of bridges, and so then when people come to the studio, and then they'll say, "Oh, that's the Golden Gate Bridge," and I'll go, "Exactly right." And then somebody else says, "Oh, that's the Jamestown Bridge in Rhode Island." That's what it is. Whatever you want it to be, that's what it is. So I did a lot of the sailboat ones. I think something like 19 of those. I did.
That's the first.
Yeah.
The first that I noticed were the sailboats.
Right. Yeah. There's a few of those left,
A
but
couple
yeah,
of
those
those
were
left.
really successful.
Yeah.
Then I was taking another. Go ahead.
No.
Okay. I was taking another class in New Haven, and it was abstract, I believe. I forget what we were doing, but she would each day she would give an assignment for the next week. And this one particular assignment, she said to build a cityscape, and I'd not done anything like that before, so that's what got me started on the cityscapes, which I really like those. So I've done. Yeah, I've done a lot of those. So this is the one that Frank owns. And there's that Starbucks coffee cup
There's a
thing.
Starbucks.
There it is. Yeah. And this was maybe the very first one, or first, second, or third, or that I made, I'm not sure. But, I didn't have a real big plan in mind. You can tell because there's not a lot of shapes in here. But the little TV antennas were what were so much fun, and I think that's what adds a lot of interest to this particular
And I was attracted
collage.
to that because I'm old enough to remember when everybody had
when they
TV
were like
antennas.
that. Yeah.
And it's a very city thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But it's not any particular city that I had in mind. It can be anybody's city. And so for me, it's the color, what I pick for the colors.
That's what I was going to say. I love the colors, the muted colors that you selected for this.
I think a lot of my work does involve colors like that. For some reason, I'm just drawn to softer kind of colors. This one is a real city. This is the view. It's hard for me to keep these straight here. This is the view from my son's house. He lives in San Francisco on the third floor of a typical San Francisco type of house. So if you look out his window across the street, this is the view across the street. And I had taken a photograph because there was a rainbow in the sky right there.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so I made that one into a collage, and it has the wires. There's a lot more wires, up there that I didn't put in. I figured that's enough wires, but so that one, and you pick out the sky first, and then what colors go with that, and make it look like San Francisco. And
Yeah, it does.
so that's that one.
Again, the colors, the combinations of colors,
Yeah.
they're just so appealing.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good about picking out colors.
You are, yeah.
So I like that. So I thought that it might be interesting for the viewers to see like the progression. You've seen now several of the finished collages, and this is the most recent cityscape that I've done, but I've not framed it yet. And once again, it's not any particular city. So when I've done the cityscapes, I've done some cities that I know and other cities that I just sort of invent. And I can do it by just looking at multiple photographs from either I've taken or I can find them online or whatever. And this particular collage, when I went to pick out the sky first, which is what I do all the time, I had this gray piece back there. And it's actually oil and cold wax. I had taken an oil and cold wax workshop, and so I had all these pieces of paper that have oil and cold wax on them, not knowing what to do with them. So I thought, well, I could use that for the sky. So I cut that piece out, and then these are very waxy, these bumps here, and so nothing would stick to it. So I had to take like a scraper of some kind or other and try to get that off. So that was sort of successful, not always, but at any rate, so that's the latest one I've done.
So this is a much more elaborate
It is, and
look.
I find myself, it's like meditation. I mean, the music is playing in the background, and I love putting in the little windows. And,
Yeah. And look at this, you created some kind of a skyscraper.
A piece,
effect with
yeah,
that.
whatever that is.
Yeah.
I know, a skyscraper or a church
Yeah,
or whatever it
yeah.
is, yeah. And sometimes it's not, it's not like I'm duplicating something that I know. It's like you look at that and you think you need a little bit of height over here, so you
Right,
put in a building.
right.
I need some pink over there, so you put in a building.
Yeah.
And
Again, the colors,
Yeah.
they're just so beautiful together. And this is what?
that's another interesting piece of paper.
Yeah, it is.
I know, I'm trying to remember how I did that one. Because
Very
I've
interesting.
got a chunk of that paper at home, I remember, and I can't
Yeah.
remember how we did it. I did it in a class. It's probably, I have a lot of things that you can use to make texture in your artwork, and so it could be the kind of thing that you put in your, you put the glasses and stuff on in the cupboards in your kitchen.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
so they don't move
Yeah,
around.
yeah.
It could be something like
Yeah, it
that,
looks
and
like
we
that.
pushed it down
And
into
this
the
gives
paint.
it a three-dimensional effect,
Yeah.
having the tree
Yeah.
be in front of everything.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Yeah, you got
above
to plan that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to be a little bit careful because sometimes my trees end up looking sort of spooky-like. They look too much like Halloween or something. So I have to be careful how I cut them out at times.
Yeah.
But I do kind of get lost in that whole business
So
of
what did you call
finding.
this?
This one was Cement Playground.
Wow. Well, our time is almost up. I can't
Is it?
believe it.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's been so interesting, Anne,
Yeah,
to hear you
thank you.
describe, how you go about doing this, and then to be able to see some of the beautiful work that you create.
Thanks.
So thank you so much for
Thank you for having me.
being my first guest on the show. So anyway, Anne Coffey is an example of what of the kind of artist that Branford has many of, and over the next series of broadcasts, we'll be highlighting other artists who work in different mediums and who have different ways of expressing their artistic talent. I just want to quickly mention, and I don't know when this will be aired, but the Branford Arts Alliance is doing a summer and winter art show at the Academy on the Green, a little white building right on the corner of Monterey Street. And we're going to feature artists, paintings, photographs. Anne is going to show one of her pieces. And we're just going to try to liven everyone's spirits by having something bright and maybe flowery to look at in the depths of winter. So if you can make it, it's the last weekend, Friday, I think it's the 25th. There'll be a reception from 5 to 7, and then 12 to 4 on Saturday and Sunday. We would love to see you there. I hope you enjoyed the program. I've certainly enjoyed talking with Anne. Again, I know Anne, and we've had conversations, but this is the first time I've had a chance to really sit down and talk to you about the artistic process that goes into.
Yeah,
And
it was very enjoyable.
I really love that last piece you showed me. I don't know. Do I want another one or not? I don't know, but I may be talking to you about that. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed the rest of the early winter. Lucky so far that we haven't had too much snow. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.